Hello, everyone. It is 1 o'clock, and so we wanted to get started. My name is Stephanie Emmerich, and I will be your facilitator today. I'm the manager of digital content here at Boys Town, and so welcome and thank you for taking time to join us today. Just a few kind of housekeeping setup things for all of you who are attending. You are muted, so you're not going to be able to unmute your microphone, but we really want to hear from you. So please use your chat box to send us questions. I will be monitoring that throughout the presentation and the conversation. So just put your questions in as they come up, and I will share them with our presenters. And one thing on the chat, if you look at your chat box, please just make sure it's set to everyone so all of the attendees are able to see what you're asking. You always have the option to send us a private message if you have a particular question you don't want to share. But please, that can help kind of keep the conversation going in that way. So we encourage you to do that. A few other things, we are recording. So if you have to leave early, if you want to share it with some colleagues who are not able to attend, or you want to refer back to it later, we will share the recording with you via email once it is processed and posted to our website. Also, all the information we share with you today, we will send you in a packet. So don't worry about that. You'll be able to receive all of the information. And if any of you need a certificate of attendance or anything like that, that will also be in the follow-up email after the webinar is over. So we want to get started in respect of everyone's time, and we have two of our presenters here today, and I'm going to give them the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about themselves. So I want to turn it over to John McGuire. If you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your history with Boys Town.
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Again, my name is John McGuire. I actually started at Boys Town back in 1987. So while saying that out loud, that makes me feel really old. But actually started off in our residential program. From there, moved into several different administrative positions. Actually was a trainer in our training department for a period of time. And I have also actually had left Boys Town at one point in time and taught in one of the area Omaha public schools, and eventually returned back to Boys Town and have been in my current role now for, oh gosh, I think going on about 10 years. And so now I have the opportunity to speak with people around the country about our model and needs that different schools and districts have, and kind of put together a plan that might be able to help them, and that's what keeps me busy. So that's about me.
Well, thank you, John. It's great to have you here today. And I know that you've got a lot of great information to share with everyone. And so we'll turn it over to you, Steph, if you can take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your experience with Boys Town.
Excellent. Yes. Hello, everyone. My name's Steph Jensen, and I came to Boys Town also. As you say it out loud, it seems really long, but a little after John, though. I started in 2001. Before that, though, I was a middle school teacher and reading specialist, and had the opportunity to implement Boys Town in our middle school. We implemented the behavior model, but we also implemented the expedition literacy model in our school as well. So I had a lot of experience using both of those products in my experience with teaching, and then came over to the training department, like I said, in 2001. So I've had lots of opportunities to work with schools, agencies, programs, and even countries all over the world in implementing the Boys Town model. So very good. And so that gives us a nice platform for what we're going to do today, which is talk about the funds that are out there. John and I both were around when we had the first large stimulus that went to schools back in 2009 under President Obama, and those TARP funds that were released. And so we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some of our experience in applying those funds. What were some of the real successful things that we saw schools and education professionals do back then? And apply that to some of the funds that are available today. So we want to talk through what some of those things are. And Stephanie, for some reason, it doesn't want to let me share, but let me try again here. Okay.
I think it should work for you now. Just had to basically pass you the ball.
Okay. Okay. Now it's working. Yay.
Good.
Okay. So we can get that up here. All right. So let's take a look at just what the funds that are available. Many of you are probably familiar with some of the funding packages that have come about because of COVID stimulus. And so we'll look at these. There we go. Here we go. And just kind of break these down a little bit. But really, as you look at this, there's more funding accessible to schools right now than we have ever seen in the past. And this doesn't include what is budgeted under President Biden for the 2021-2022 school year, which we've seen with Title I funds, significant increases in Title I. So we know that there's funds out there. And what are the best ways to apply those funds to get the greatest benefit for this very unique funding? And so as we think back, or as I think back, and John, you can share your stories too, but I think specifically back to 2009 and looking at the funding that was released then. And what I found was there were kind of two different approaches. I'm starting to hear some of that today with these funds. And some of those approaches were, we're going to hire a lot of new social workers, we're going to hire a lot of new counselors in the district, and we're going to apply these funds for more staffing, so we can have better staffing. And the problem with that was we didn't provide enough strength. We didn't strengthen the tools and strategies for our educators, our long-term employees, our employees that were going to stay in those roles, regardless of whether the stimulus stayed or not. And so we looked at some of those examples, you know, the schools that put those funds into school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists. It became very challenging for them when those funds went away. A lot of those positions had to go away as well, and they hadn't built that capacity internally within their school staff to maintain the successes that they were seeing by hiring those additional people. The other approach that we saw was that approach where really focused on applying that funding to providing better professional development, building internal capacity within districts so that it's something that could be sustained regardless of if that stimulus funding continued on or not. And so as we look at these two different models, I would say the schools that we worked with back in 2009, and John, tell me if you agree, many of those schools are still implementing it with success. They were able to apply those funds, build that capacity, and build that ability to maintain that implementation even when the funds went away.
Yeah, I would agree. I saw the same thing in the folks that I worked with. And so we do still have a lot of folks out there that, you know, are still kind of the Boys Town model success stories.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting kind of looking back, as it's true exactly what you said. There were folks that really put that emphasis into positions. And again, you know, looking back, you understand the thinking, hey, more counselors or more school psych, you know, school psych gets to help more kids. And that's true. But even with that increase in helping kids, that number of additional help still compared to the greater population still tends to be a pretty small amount of kids that you're actually able to impact. So again, being able to, not that we're trying to put anybody out of a job or keep anybody from getting a job, but putting that into a more sustainable plan, you know, again, just looking back, I think that was a lesson that we certainly learned from that, and hopefully schools have as well, that if you really want to make a big impact, it takes a systems-wide approach, and less dependent on, you know, particular positions. But yeah, very, very consistent with what I saw as well.
Yeah. And as we look at how the funds are focused and we kind of look at where you can apply these funds, I think Boys Town is really uniquely equipped to connect all these different areas. So when we look at within the school building, right, we can provide that support there, but we also have external supports in the programs that we have through our Boys Town National, our sites that we have across the country, as well as the supports that we have through our hospitals and through our research. And so as we kind of look at this approach, looking to really build from the school model into strengthening communities and families, Boys Town can really pull a lot of those things together in a real consistent and coherent way. So as we look at within the school environment, some of those things, there's a huge focus on social emotional learning. And again, with our opportunities to talk and been talking with people throughout this COVID, the closures and quarantine, I think you'll agree that we see schools in different stages. And a lot of that depends on, I think, location. And when schools got back to business, when they were able to get back to some of that face-to-face learning. I was just having a conversation with someone yesterday, a principal yesterday, who was expressing they didn't come back to any sort of face-to-face learning, brick and mortar, until April. And she was sharing that, kids were really hoping. She said there was a lot of motivation, a lot of excitement, but they thought they were going to be able to come back in January. And then it just continued and continued. They didn't get back until April. And she said then not only did they lose some of that momentum, she said it was like, letting the air out of a balloon when kids were told that they weren't going to, and that the delay continued and continued, that when finally they were able to open in April, there wasn't that motivation. There wasn't that momentum. And she said that has really had a huge impact on just the climate of the school with the kids that are there. They're still continuing some of they're doing some of the virtual learning, continuing that. But she said not only is she seeing a need in the students that they're serving, but also in the staff. She said it's been very difficult for them to come back and be able to connect socially, and saying that they're seeing a lot more high-level behaviors with very small, to very small reasoning within the school with both. So she said the triggering, she's seeing a much quicker triggering of students and of staff because they've been so disconnected for so long. And she said that's really where they have their greatest focus. She said academic needs, absolutely, but she said we have to get people comfortable being able to communicate and come back together. And are you seeing any of that?
Yeah, oh, for sure. We hear that a lot. It's again, it's been really interesting in talking with the folks that I do. I mean, we've had everything from, some schools have been open all year and have dealt with the challenges, but been able to stay open. Other places that have been closed all year, like you're saying, and many that have had a hybrid, which to me seems
Right.
like the most challenging out of all those scenarios.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's been real interesting, and I do think that there's much more of awareness of the challenges. I mean, kids obviously present enough challenges as it is, much less now coming off of COVID and the concerns about just some more mental health issues. Actually, my wife works at the Boys Town hotline, and they've actually seen an increase in calls and mental health related, and they sort of feel strongly that a lot of that is due to the circumstances with COVID, a lot of the isolation that some families and kids have had. Parents maybe, if they were lucky to not lose their jobs, maybe they were at home, by themselves or with siblings or whatever the situation might be, and just all the stress that all those different situations create. It's the need for strong programs to deal with kids' behavior under normal circumstances is really important, but obviously with what we're all coming off of, I think everybody's realizing that it's going to be even more critical for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, as we continue to have those conversations, having that concrete approach. And I think that that's where Boys Town really fits this need, this specific time, I think, because we can provide those concrete strategies. Part of our conversation, and she was saying, I just need to give my staff something so that they have something that is predictable. because we know kids just in normal circumstances are unpredictable. And now with everything that's occurred, that they're even more unpredictable. So she said, I really feel like the best thing that I can provide for my staff is a predictable structure so that regardless of what behavior they're facing, whatever's happening throughout the day, they have a strategy to respond. And she said, that's where that social emotional learning, you have to be able to move from the philosophical, the idea of it, to the practical strategies. And I think that's where Boys Town really can fit that need and play a role in increasing those successes and reducing some of that stress for teachers.
So I have a question. There's a couple questions that have come in on talking about there's with hearing about learning loss, but then also social emotional learning and the trauma that's coming in. Talk about like the planning process or ways that you have currently been working with some schools to make that plan of doing that, and then how the Boys Town and how we can kind of address some of those issues, because this is so new for everyone, and it is also your experiences of working with across the country. You've addressed that several times so far about how everything is different. I mean, even within one city, schools can be different. So some of that, the importance of personalizing that one size does not fit all.
Right. Absolutely. And John, I'll let you start out on that one.
Yeah, sure. I think that's one thing that's really unique about the Boys Town model is that it does provide a lot of flexibility in how we can go about implementing something in a school or district. We've certainly learned over the years some things that tend to work better than others and certain approaches that tend to work better than others. But, every school and every district is different. Short-term and long-term goals are different, and so part of that conversation that we like to have when we are lucky enough to talk with folks is kind of exploring that. What do you see as your biggest areas of need now? Where do you see yourselves long-term? And sometimes they have an answer for that, sometimes they don't. That's okay, but we definitely try and put a plan together that's going to be beneficial to kind of meet those needs. And so sometimes it's just very basic, and we're going to start with training and get people up and trained, get everybody on the same page so that folks in the school are using the same language, using the similar approach, and really, kind of going back to what Stephanie talked about is just that very predictable and consistent approach to how we deal with kids, because we know kids do better when things are predictable and consistent. And let's be honest with ourselves, so do the adults. So having that consistent plan is really, really important. So sometimes it just starts with training, and we say, okay, let's get everybody trained, and then we'll kind of see how things go. And more often than not, when we do that, we usually get a call back at some point from a principal or a superintendent saying, hey, we've taken this first step, things are going really well, what's the next step for us? Or it's going really well in my school, and the principal in the neighboring school has heard how well it's going. We're looking at maybe doing something district-wide. How might we go about doing that? And so we can help with all those things. Again, whether it's just at a specific school or, looking at something more of a district-wide approach. I think that if I could, kind of focus on probably two areas, we really look at that sustainability piece kind of broken down into two tracks. And it's, again, once we've got that kind of core people trained, but we help develop people to eventually become their own in-house trainers, so that you have people on your staff that actually can provide training, so that you're not as reliant on Boys Town to have to do that. So that's kind of one track, and we have a process for that we certainly would kind of talk through with you and determine whether or not that's the best fit. And then the other piece of that is developing, again, people in your own school or in your own district that we would refer to as coaches or consultants. And they're really the people that kind of provide that after training support to continue to help develop teacher skills and to ensure that implementation continues. Just to be blunt, if you've been in education for any length of time, schools are notorious for kind of flavor of the year, flavor of the month, flavor of the year professional development. And a new school year's coming up, and you got some money that you got to spend, and you got a day or two of professional development, and there's this program out there, and so you put your staff through training, and that's great, and you can check that box, and then a month, 2 months, 3 months go by, and probably has never been spoken about again. There's very little evidence that anything really actually happened, as a result of that training, and so clearly not effective. And so again, having people in your building eventually that can provide that training, that can provide that ongoing support is absolutely critical to the success. Kids, when they learn something new, need follow-up support, need that ongoing help. Adults are no different. And so again, we would talk with folks about the best way to go about doing all those things. And as Stephanie mentioned, it's not a cookie cutter approach. Everybody's different. So we certainly could talk with you about, again, depending on what your goals are, the best way to go about meeting your goals and how that plan can look, and everything from timelines to sequence of trainings and processes to selecting the right people for those different positions. That's a really important piece. And again, it looks different for everybody, but again, I think Steph would probably agree. We both, we've been doing this so long. There's certainly, while everybody's different, there are certainly kind of common factors that oftentimes we've run into that says this is more likely to succeed. This approach may be more likely to succeed than this way, and we can kind of help guide that conversation. But two really important pieces. And again, I think if it ties back to the funding piece, when the money goes away, if you've got a sustainable model, then that can carry on whether the funding is there or not.
And that really is that lasting legacy component of it. You want to apply these funds for something that's going to have that long-term effect, and building that plan, putting those building blocks together to plan for that long-term success and long-term implementation. These funds really provide a unique opportunity for that. The other thing that I would add to that is the nice thing is we look at how these funds are, how they're written, how they can be applied. There's really a big focus on community and families. And that's probably something John and I would both agree. We have had so many conversations with schools and educators around what can we do for the parents, because we know parents were struggling trying to juggle multiple roles of whatever job they have, as well as they have their kids home trying to learn, and you just really saw this outcry for support for parents. And we also have a really fantastic parenting program that partners or pairs aligns with our school model. And so it really helps to build those bridges between the families, the communities, and the school environment when we're all kind of on the same page. And we saw a huge increase in attendance to those parenting programs. We really are seeing a lot of parents having that interest. And when we can provide those tools for the parents as well as to our teachers, we see that those connections between school and home become much, much stronger. So we look at the different things that are available and this unique opportunity with the funds. Boys Town really does have those programs available to connect those things together. Even when we talk about learning loss, and was seeing some of the data around reading scores and the reduction in reading scores because of the disconnect with all of this. And we also have a really phenomenal reading program that can get those scores back up in a pretty short amount of time. And so just a variety of things that are available to apply those funds and kind of have that similar language across all content.
So thinking about, and I know the answer to this question, but some people who are becoming familiar, thank you, it was on social and emotional learning, with that, with the, and also adding in, if you guys can talk a little bit about the data collection process. But when we talk about the plans, because one of the things of where this is an opportunity and a need of planning, of how it can fit to, of how important is the plan, and also evaluating the plan. How is that part of the process of giving tools and resources and equipment basically to evaluate how the different programs are working?
No, yeah, that's a good question. And certainly when we go in, especially kind of when we're newly working with a school or a district, oftentimes it's, typically it's going to be our Boys Town trainers that are actually going in and providing that coaching and consultation to schools. And so again, typically how that works is, we like to show up on a normal day, if there is such a thing, and actually go into classes and try and kind of blend in with the woodwork a little bit, sit in the back of the room. We'd like for things we want to see teachers and kids just kind of doing what they do. And we do some data collection and looking at different things, that we know are key within our model, and just good sound teaching practices. And just to kind of give you some ideas, some of the things we look at is the rate of praise compared to the rate of correction. How often are teachers interacting positively with their kids compared to negatively or in a more of a corrective kinds of situation? Because what we're really looking for, at a minimum, is about a 4-to-1. And then some, higher needs kids and higher needs programs, it's even a higher ratio than that. But we're looking for at least kind of that 4-to-1 ratio of positive to negative or corrective interactions with kids. We're looking at, well, how do kids respond when teachers are addressing them? What are kids doing? Are they complying? Are they responding? Are they, is the behavior improving or is it getting worse? Those kinds of things. Are we doing, is the teacher or the staff person, how much preventive teaching are they doing with their kids? We know a lot of problem situations that arise probably could have been at least lessened or avoided altogether by maybe more proactive or preventive type of approach. So those are just a couple of the different things that we take a look at, as well as some others. If we're in some special ed programs, we have kind of a point system that we'll use with kids. And so, sometimes we'll do point card or point sheet reviews. There's a lot of good data that comes from those. And so we really use that data to kind of guide how we talk with the teachers and recommendations that we might make, and pointing out things that they're doing really well, identifying areas where they can further develop, and really make those decisions based on some actual data, and not just kind of gut feelings or kind of what seems right that particular day. It's definitely more data-based decisions. And so when we go in then to develop a school to have their own kind of in-house coaches or consultants, one of the things that we really emphasize in that training is we're really looking to develop kind of an inner rate of reliability amongst that school's own coaches or consultants or that district. Because one of the things that we want to make sure happens is, if Stephanie goes into a classroom one day to do an observation and she is looking for certain data points and gives direction to go one way, and then a month later, Steph comes in and she's looking for different data points and gives advice it doesn't take long to hear all that and go, this is not going to work and it's not going to be successful. So we want everybody looking for the same things, interpreting data very much in a consistent way, so that they can give very consistent, feedback and help, and again, in that implementation. So, and again, how that process works, it varies a little bit, but typically it starts with, some training, and then usually some co-consulting with the newly trained coaches, and then our staff, of course, working together to achieve that consistency. So again, we're going in there collecting data. If teachers are having maybe a particular student or groups of students that's presenting particular challenges, we can strategize with them and give them some suggestions as to maybe some areas that they can kind of really focus on until we can come back and kind of reassess to where things are at. So all those pieces again are really important parts to providing that ongoing support. And I think too, it increases accountability. Again, I think in the past, teachers go through professional development, then nothing happens. Well, if our staff knows that we're going to do training, and then guess what? Somebody's coming back in 4 to 6 weeks to make sure that it's actually being used. Accountability is good. That usually results in people going, okay, they're serious about this, and we're putting some meat behind this, and so we're gonna do the things that we've been trained to do, and make sure that we're pushing forward. So that's kind of how that piece works. So Steph, anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, I just, again, the cohesiveness and the way that it brings the staff together also, when you look at when we're able to communicate and welcome feedback and welcome someone coming into our classroom, one of our peers to come in and do an observation, it really becomes less intimidating, I guess, when you are all functioning off that same model. And so I think that that's where, you have those core pieces. And so when we come in and do the initial training, everyone is hearing the same thing. We're all going to be trying to apply the same approaches. We're going to use the same strategies, which really creates that predictable, structured environment from classroom to classroom, for student to student. It also then creates that predictability for us as educators. So if I know that we have these key elements that we're trying to implement, so like John said, we want to be proactive, we want to do prevention, so we want to select certain skills that we're all going to take some time to teach. We know what those skills are. We put it on a schedule, and we make sure that we are being accountable to at least introducing those basic components to all of our students. So we know that they've all been front loaded, but as an educator, I know how we're going to do that. We're not left to our own devices, if you will. There's a plan for that. And then you have another key element, which is that reinforcement part, because it always sounds really good. We want to be more positive with kids, right? And then we come face to face with a real life kid, and sometimes that goes out the window. And so we talk about really structured ways to use reinforcement and praise. That's part of the training. And then we go into applying consequences and doing some of those things and having it all laid out so that we know as educators, this is our core curriculum for social emotional learning. This is our core curriculum as we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a really solid base in that. And so now that we all we're learning the same tools, we're trying to apply them in our classroom, and then we have a student that it's just not working with. I might have one student or one class period that I'm really struggling with, and then I can reach out to John and say, hey, will you just come in and sit in my class for the first 10 minutes and just give me some feedback. What am I missing? And then you know that feedback is going to be around one of those key elements. So maybe John comes in and, like he said, he sees that I'm really correcting this student a lot and I'm not using a whole lot of reinforcement. So you might want to try using one of those strategies, one of those tools, and see if that makes a difference. I might not have noticed that I was using more negative consequences and not reinforcing, kind of creating that environment. So again, as you look at, it's not a cookie cutter approach the way that we do the planning, but once we get into the training piece of it, there are some core components that really allow it to be consistent, which then allows for others to be able to coach it and train it, which provides that longevity.
Yeah, as I was listening to you both, all I keep thinking about is, there are opportunities now to implement a social and emotional learning curriculum right into schools and really make it part of that focus, because it's going to help with the academic curriculum that is the reason that the kids are there. And part of having a good, consistent social and emotional learning curriculum and implementing in that way and being able to possibly look at the idea of having the coaches and the consultants come in is everyone's playing the same game. It really does implement those same kind of strategies of where, if we think about it from a sports analogy, when you're in the middle of a game, that's where you might be doing something over and over, that same thing, and you don't see that. And then another perspective. And so it's a collaborative effort to achieve success. It is not a gotcha. It's not, we want to catch you doing wrong, because that's with behavior. It's not about catching kids doing something wrong. It's about helping them make those good social and emotional learning behavior choices. And that's the same thing with a good social and emotional learning curriculum that that is taught well and supported, it's going to help. It's a win-win for everyone involved, the teachers, the students, the administrators, and everyone in the building. One thing we have not touched on yet is, what does it look like and what are the pieces involved? When you're thinking about, opportunities and plans, what does training look like? What are pieces? What are options? What are different planning options to think about?
No,
And that
good.
just,
Oh, go ahead,
go
Steph. Sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
This is a good one. We both want to answer.
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, as you can see here, I mean, again, I think one of the things that really is unique about Boys Town is, while we have different trainings and different workshops that are, a universal approach, or kind of that, kids that kind of fall into that second tier, that tertiary tier, while there's, different trainings for each of those groups to best kind of hone in on that specific group of kids. The nice thing again about it, if you probably put this all together here as we've talked, and if you've been in any of our additional or our other webinars, the common theme through all that again is that social skills piece, and those strategies that we use. So whether I'm in a special ed program, working with a junior in high school, the skills that we're working on are going to be very much like in a general ed class, with a 7th grader or with a 5th grader. Now, again, how I talk to them is obviously going to be different depending on the age of the student, but the skills are the skills. A 1st grader that doesn't follow directions is the same skill as a senior that doesn't follow directions. Now, the scary part is sometimes the behavior is very much the same, right? We see that far too often, but the skill is the same. So we're going to make sure that we're teaching the skill in that situation of following directions. But again, I want to make sure that we emphasize we are going to speak to those kids differently, because obviously there's a big age difference, but there are some true concepts throughout, regardless of age. So for example, if I'm a sound, strong academic teacher, if I see a student make a mistake, I shouldn't just, I'm just not going to drop the hammer on them and tell them they screwed up and put a big red check on their page, right? I may point out to them where they made their mistake. I may reteach the concept so that they're clear about how it works. I may explain to them why things work the way that it does. And then a good teacher is going to pretty much always put that student back into the position where they have to demonstrate some level of understanding, whether it's to rework the problem or maybe explain back to the teacher, how they would do it differently, those kind of things, because we want to make sure that they understand that concept. That's true in kindergarten. That's true as a senior. And we really take kind of those same concepts in how we deal with behavior. We're not just going to tell kids, hey, you screwed up. That was wrong. That's inappropriate. Don't do that. We're going to explain to them what their mistake was. But just like with academics, we're going to tell them how to do it instead. We may explain to them why it works the way that it does and why they should, use those kinds of behaviors, and then we're going to put them back in a situation where they need to be able to demonstrate some level of understanding. So how kids learn behavior and how kids learn academics is very much the same, regardless of where kids fall kind of on the, whether it's a universal or tertiary or anywhere in the middle. And the same thing is true with behavior. It's taught very much the same way. It's learned very much the same way. And so some of those concepts that we know are effective with academics are also effective with how we teach behavior. Where it gets goofy is, well, gosh, it's just, why is behavior so much, why doesn't it work? Why don't more people do that? Well, usually because when it comes to behavior, there's a whole lot of emotion involved, whether it's the student or the teacher, and it's usually a combination of the two that tends to make situations go sideways when we're dealing with kids, more challenging behavior. So if it goes back to that predictability and consistency, if I've got a consistent approach, regardless of where kids kind of fall on the scale here, that's what then begins to really impact behavior. So, and I guess the last thing I would say here is, I probably talked too long already, Steph, I'll kick it back to you here, is, people will say, well, gosh, we like this curriculum and we want to get some lesson plans and do all this kind of stuff. And those are great places to start. But I always tell people, you know what, that is fine. And you definitely want to have that as a piece of your plan and your program. But what makes or breaks your school, your classroom, your interaction with that one student is when it's, 10 o'clock in the morning or it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and some behavior just happens, right? Because it always does, but there's behavior that spontaneously occurs in the classroom or in the hallway, the lunchroom or whatever. It's whether or not that staff person that interacts with them has the ability to effectively deal with that behavior. That's where the rubber really meets the road. And so that's why it's critically important that everybody in your staff is all, again, same, walking the walk, talking the talk in a very consistent approach. So again, even though we've got different, kind of kids in different groups here, some of the strategies might be a little bit different, and there may be some things that we emphasize in one area that maybe are a little bit more in another, but it's going to be very much a consistent approach in terms of the skills, the strategies is going to be consistent. So wherever that kid goes in school, we should be dealing with behavior in a very consistent way.
Mm-hmm.
Steph, anything you want to add?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what I like to say is the strategies, the interventions are the same. The dosage is different. So that's what makes it so concrete and practical, because we know that social emotional learning can sometimes seem a little squishy, right? And we don't know exactly how to teach that. We're focused on our academics. We know how to teach our academics, and then here comes this behavior, and we don't know exactly how to respond in that same way. And so we look at the core components of it. The training is very similar. The strategies are similar. The interventions are going to be the same, but the dosage is going to be different. The way we apply it in a specialized environment is going to look a little bit different than the way we do it in that general ed or that universal level. But our goal is that everyone receives the basic, the key dosage. So that's that universal. We want to make sure that everyone receives that basic dosage so that everyone's on the same page. But we know, just like with academics, there's going to be kiddos that struggle with certain behaviors, with certain social skills. So we have a plan for that, right? We'll apply those same strategies, but we're going to apply them more individually. And we might spend a little more time practicing and reinforcing those at that tier 2. And then tier 3, we're going to live in the teaching component and the reinforcement component and the practice component. We're going to spend a whole lot of time there, because in those settings, you have more time to do that. And so when you look at, yes, the training is consistent, the dosages are going to be a little bit different. And that's why the planning is so important. Having that conversation and seeing where is the greatest need, where are you going to get the biggest impact for what you're looking to accomplish. And that's where we can really talk through and identify some of those key components and start with plans from doing just a one-day overview to kind of test it out and see, kind of splash around it a little bit, see if it's going to work, all the way into that full capacity building like John talked about in developing your own coaches and consultants, and then moving towards having your own trainers. We have this unique opportunity right now with the funding packages that are out there to be able to make those connections and build that programming so that it is really comprehensive and sustainable.
So you can, I think we're wrapping up on some of the questions. One thing I wanted to highlight on was the planning process. That's thinking about this whole opportunity to plan, and because we're still in that process of where it's kind of figuring out what's going to still happen. The planning process is an ongoing process. It's not create my plan and it can evolve, right? It can grow. You can scaffold, right? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was just saying is we can start as small or as big. We do make some recommendations of what we've seen as far as most successful initiatives and implementations. And so you might say we want to do all of our schools in the district right now. And we might say, let's hold off on that. There might be a better way to do it. And so you really are able to build upon that plan. I think John and I both like to at least start with the conversation of what full implementation looks like, so you know what pieces you're able to pull in and build on. But a lot of times we can't start there, right? We have to kind of break it apart a little bit, and we're able to work with you on creating that plan that really works best for you. That's where we say it's not that cookie cutter. It really does have to be customized based on your individual needs.
Yeah, again, I think it's not to belabor the point, but it is different for everybody. I mean, we've had some districts where we've gone in and we've done district-wide training and it's gone really, really well, and we've gone in and done district-wide training and it didn't go so well. And there's a lot of different reasons why that, why some of those things happen. And so again, I think just in some of those conversations, if you if you want to give us a call or reach out to us on the website and we can connect with you, I think we can explore, again, what your short-term goals are, your long-term goals are. Just the, for example, I mean, if you're calling from just a, one school and maybe it's a smaller school, well, there's going to be some things we probably would say, hey, based on that alone, here's what we would recommend. This is what we've seen, typically be the most likely to be, successful. If you come and say, hey, we've been talking about this within our district and we're really interested. This is the route we want to go. We really want to do a district-wide approach. Again, we can talk through the different ways and make some recommendations based on a lot of experience with a lot of different people to say, okay, here's how that should look then in order to give yourselves the greatest chance of success and actually, reaping the benefits of the time and money that you're going to, put into making this work. And so, whether it's training, putting in those sustainability pieces, again, all that can look a little bit differently, and we'll explore all that with you and just kind of see where it goes and figure out a plan that's going to be, workable for you. Because we want to see you succeed. It makes us feel good. We know that we've made an impact. You guys, you feel like you've gotten your time and your money's worth, and ultimately, your kids are happier. And when kids are happier, staff is generally happier. And when staff is happier, administration is happier. And so it's just kind of a snowball that builds momentum if you do it the right way.
Right.
So in addition to, I also know the answer to this question, but I want you guys to talk about it. In addition to the trainings and the different options we talk about models of depending on, it's talking about a needs assessment, talking about your goal, talking about the goals they want to accomplish. What other supports are there after training? Is it just go, good luck, or what other tools and supports might be available that can help that ongoing implementation?
Well, there's several different options. Again, there's everything from, formal, where we write up a contract for a schedule of, follow-up coaching and consulting from Boys Town staff. And, again, that can look different. We've got some schools that we go, follow up quarterly, some even more than that, depending on, what we're doing. That would be kind of on the more formal end of things, and we certainly can do that, and we do a lot of that. On the less formal side, our trainers, after they go and provide training for a school or a district, they're great about answering phone calls or taking emails. So, hey, somebody say, I'm having trouble with this kid. Can you give me some suggestions? Or I know we talked about, the daily point system and how kids move from daily to merit or to progress. And how, can you talk me through that again? They get those kinds of questions all the time. They're happy to help with that. And they're great resources for follow-up. And then even just things like, on our website, we've got all kinds of different lesson plans. We've got webinars and on-demand trainings, and some are kind of training, some are more refresher kinds of things. So there's a whole lot of resources, many of them of which are free. Even the ones that have a fee is minimal. So there's all kinds of resources there. Our Boys Town Press has an endless amount of written materials, books, videos for, all ages, all kinds of different things. The customer service reps that work there really know that stuff and can help maybe steer folks towards resources as well. So We really look at it as kind of a team approach. I get calls different times from customers or folks that I work with. They say, hey, can you, I got a question for you. And sometimes it's training related. Sometimes I'll answer it. Sometimes I'll steer them back towards the trainer. I'm sure Steph gets some of those kinds of questions too. So there's, again, a real wide range of things. We don't look at it as, hey, we're going to train you and then see you later. We have a whole kind of menu of things that can be available to help provide that support.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we've wrapped up, we've answered all of our questions, and we're getting close to the end of our time. So I'm going to put this out there for both John and Steph. Your final thoughts, summaries, best practices, what words of wisdom do you want people to walk away with on thinking about the plans and opportunities that can come forth in the next few years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I go back to the saying, we never plan to fail, but that's what happens if we fail to plan. And I think that this is just such a huge opportunity. As educators, we got into education because we want to make a difference. That's the number one driver, is we want to make a difference. And sometimes there's not the funding available to do all that we want to do. And this is just such a unique opportunity to leave that lasting legacy, but it really does start with a plan. What is the plan to get the biggest bang out of this opportunity that's in front of us, so that we can leave something that lasts much longer than maybe our time there?
Yeah, I guess I would just say, it's under normal circumstances, if you continue to do the same thing and think you're going to get a different result, you're probably fooling yourselves. And now, coming off of a situation where none of us have ever been, if we think that we can just keep using the same approach and expect that things are going to get better or different, that's the definition of insanity, right? So, we're coming off of an event like none of us have ever experienced, and hopefully we never will again. And I think we're all well aware that there's some absolutely unique challenges that are, just around the corner for all of us as kids come back to school. And so we need to be prepared for that. So with this great challenge that's in front of us, the funding that is out there is also providing an opportunity like never before. And so, again, we can't just sit back and expect the same old to meet the challenge, because in many cases it wasn't meeting the challenge before all this, much less now with the extra challenge. So again, now's a unique opportunity to put some things in that can be significant change agent for years to come, if that's the direction you want to head. So we would, I know I speak for Steph and everybody, we'd love to have a chance to talk with you and see if we can't put some things together that you might find helpful.
Thank you. And thank you both. And thank you everyone for joining us today. It really is, we're coming to the end right now. It's May 20th. We're coming to the end of many school years, another school year that was probably not what any of us thought it was going to be. And it's really a chance and an opportunity to look at what can we do over the next few years to come out of it stronger, better, implement some of those things that have been out there. There's so much emphasis on social emotional learning curriculums, tying that together, how important that is with academics. So there really is hopefully an opportunity to accomplish some of those things after a very, very challenging situation. So just most importantly, having that conversation, reaching out, and you can do it via email, you can do it you can call John or Steph, and just it's a plan. It's a conversation. They've got a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience and a lot of ideas where they can help just talk you through things. I mean, it's a conversation. It's one of those things of where it can really provide some opportunities, and it's gonna take some time, but that is where good things can come out of it. So if anyone has any additional questions, please let us know. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, John and Steph, for sharing all of your information today. For everyone who is attending and who had registered, we'll send the email. We'll get this process. We've recorded the whole thing, and we have a packet of information to send out to. So you'll have all of the information we've talked about, some different resources, and of course, phone numbers and emails, and just whatever we can do to help and help develop the plan, because that's where we are right now. So wonderful.
Very good.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.